What's up, everybody? I've got some work to do on the laser before I can run it again. So I wanted to make a video and show you guys what's going on. I'll be pulling the trans out and fixing an oil leak. And I also just found that the fuel cell's dripping from this corner right here. So I'll be taking the fuel cell out and figuring out where that's coming from. Here's what I've got going on. Got oil leaks. This coming from the oil pan. I'd already wiped it, but it was dribbling down from this corner here and from up here above the oil return. I know those oil return welds look awful. It was coming from up high. I'm not super worried about that. I'm gonna be putting a drip pan under this thing. I've had problems with getting this oil pan to seal. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. It doesn't take a gasket, but it doesn't want to seal. Same with this lower piece. The oil pans on these 67.5s are 2-piece, and this lower piece doesn't like to seal for me either. This seems to have sealed, but I'm still having a hard time getting the pan to seal to the block, which the drip pan will help me with. It's this trail that's more troublesome. And here's what we got going on. It's coming from between the bell housing and the oil pan. And at Streetcar Indy, we had the Streetcar Takeover Indy. I had the starter off. We were looking up in there, and it's coming from up high somewhere. We couldn't find anywhere obvious. You know, we looked way up in there at everything on the fronts of the heads and the sides of the heads, and we couldn't find anything. So I think it's either the rear main seal or a core plug or something. So the trans is coming out, and I'll be figuring out what's going on there. And you can see as it drips down, it's getting on the north-south bar, and it's kind of traveling, going everywhere, making a mess. So we got to get that fixed. And then that rag there is catching the ethanol that's dripping out of the fuel cell. Let's see if we can see where it's dripping from. That corner up there, and I'm not going to be able to see it too well. Anyway. I noticed something while I was working on tearing this apart. The bell housing of the transmission is shoved firm up against this lower flange of the oil pan. And this transmission and this oil pan were never meant to get along, so this is to be expected, but that may be what's causing the oil leak. That trans may be pushing on that oil pan. And you can see here I had to grind down these little heads for these big old long bolts that are part of the fasteners for the oil pan, but that's not where it's pushing. You can see there's a gap there. It's pushing back here. This is what the factory shim plate for the 67.5 looks like, and you can see there's supposed to be space down here at the bottom. So it's strange because I am using a shim plate, but I'm using a shim plate out of a 3000 GT, and then I lopped the section off for the starter here, so we had proper depth for the starter. But why would the transmission and the oil pan be making contact down here? I'm kind of scratching my head. And this oil pan was put in with the transmission already on the engine. So if it needed to be shimmied over, you know, maybe it's a matter of, you know, space on the fastener holes. I don't know, but I really think that's what I'm gonna find, is that the trans is pushing the oil pan over and causing this leak. Back to it. All right, just got the transmission off. Sorry I didn't film all that. It involved some hokery with a jack and wiggling and jiggling and prying. Transmission's off though. It's over there. So anyway, here's what I see. Got some oil puddled at the bottom of the rear main here. I don't know if you'll be able to make it out on the camera, but there was like a weep line on the bottom here. You can see where it's more wet and shiny at the very bottom of the pan lip there. So I'm thinking either the rear main failed and I'm gonna replace that. I'm gonna redo the entire rear main gasket, or from that bell housing pushing against this flange here, it's pulling that lip down and off. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take and grind down this flange surface. There's actually a step here, and I'm gonna take and straight edge from the block across this and see where I need to grind. But I'm just gonna take an angle grinder to this. This does nothing for me other than acting as the stays for these big long bolts to hit the corners of the pan, which I do wanna keep if I can, but I don't have any other means of keeping these stays. And if I end up having to weld back in a full enclosure here so these don't wanna pop out, then so be it. But I need to keep this bottom edge here, but I need it to not be pressing up against the bell housing. That's a problem. So that's where I'm at. I'll drop the pan, drop the rear main, get everything cleaned up, reassembled, put back together, and hopefully no more leak. You know, the one core plug up here looks okay. These don't go anywhere. That looks fine. I don't have anything running down the block from the cylinder heads. It's a possibility. All that up there is dry, and on the shim it looked dry. So that's where I'm at. It's something here. Something in this area. Here's a shot of that bushing I was talking about that I had to have custom made to use the 2G torque converter with this V6. This is a center support bushing. It holds on to that part right there, the torque converter. It helps support the torque converter as it spins with the engine. So I had to take and have this cut down, or maybe it was the outside diameter cut down. I think that's what it was. This diameter is correct because this is for a DSM, but I had to cut down this diameter to fit the inside of the crank. That's what it was. And there's a press fit, and I can't recall how many thousandths. My machinist spec'd that for me, as he knows better than I do. Anyway, be back shortly. Oil pan is out, and other than the bell housing pushing up against the flange here, I think I found another issue that I created. For some reason, I don't know why, I decided to give the brown RTV a try, and it said it was hard setting, said it was oil resistant, all these things. This oil pan fairly fell off on its own. It wasn't glued to the block at all, and this bit here didn't even cure. It's still soft, it's still gooey. So I think we had a couple different things going on here, and I'll never use brown RTV again. I'll stick to the Ultra Black, which I almost always used, or Honda Bond. I think Honda Bond's great. Honda Bond, Yama Bond, any of the factory gray. RTV silicones. Yeah, I'm not happy about that. So I'm gonna get all that cleaned up, get a tube of Ultra Black, get that goop back on there, and get it all back together. And we'll be going to the track tonight. While I'm in here, I'll probably do some better welding on this fitting. I think I'm gonna weld it on the inside and then drill it through. You know, those welds didn't turn out too good. These oil pans suck, and I ran out of gas halfway through. And this is a patch I had to put on here to fit the starter in this spot. This oil pan wasn't made to have the starter right there. I may take and address some of that. Those welds aren't awful for me. I know guys who know what they're doing are laughing right now, but for me, those welds aren't awful. I'll probably touch up that a little bit too while I've got this down and out, just to prevent any future issues. Otherwise, though, everything looks fine. All right, back in a bit. So I've got the oil pan flanges all cleaned up and mocked back up here, just with a couple bolts to hold it in. I forgot these oil pans actually have indexing dowels. You can kind of see there's a dowel there and a dowel there to hold the position, which is really nice. It controls where the oil pan goes. There's no slop on the fasteners. That brown RTV, I'll never use it again. Don't know what possessed me. I always use Ultra Black. I'll get the rest of this crap off here. But here's another really good reason why I'll never use it again. Look at that. Just tons of it in the pickup. So much that I pulled the pickup off so I can go flush it out and clean it out, because that would be bad. All right, got a straight edge. We're gonna go across the flange of the block and see if this lip doesn't need ground down to help fix that interference issue between the bottom of the bell housing and this flange on the bottom of this oil pan. All right, so up here, across the block, can see that kind of making some noise, but not really. But watch this. That's where that lip is. So 100% that lip is an interferent. Same for over here. On this side, go across the block, coming across here just fine. Interferes with that lip. So, gonna bust out the angle grinder and sing the song of my people and take off this lip all the way across here so that the bell housing doesn't push on it. And hopefully that'll keep from the transmission pushing down, peeling this off, combined with good silicone RTV. I am still going to replace the rear main, the gasket behind the rear main housing, if you will, as well as the rear main. We'll get all that replaced so that I don't have those question marks in my life. Get all this sprayed down, cleaned up, back together, and get to the track. Okay, here's where we're at. My apologies for the long, rambly video, a bunch of wrenching. We're gonna get down to the track and get some stuff going on, but the transmission's in, starter's in, converter's torqued in, red Loctite, so on and so forth, with the oil pan. I was grinding on this thing, and I realized that that flange area in the middle here just was unnecessary. It did nothing for me. So I just cut it out and then ground what was left. And you can see now it's not touching, no more contact. These long oil pan bolts are kind of weird. I'm just gonna snug them in there as best I can. It should be okay. If not, I'll address those later. I don't really have much room to do much with them, so something in the future may have to be done. But anyway, this is where it's at. Let's get the car down to the track, make some passes, look at some data, and I'll be back with that stuff. And here is the slip for that first pass. As you saw in the video, the car went 10.8 and 125. I had a 157 60 foot, which this car has cut nothing but 1.5 60 foot since we've put the turbo on it. 0.01 reaction time for me is really good. Yeah, it's a Sportsman tree. A lot of guys are really good on the Sportsman tree. I'm not, so I was very happy with that 0.01 reaction time. All in all, this pass looks very similar to the pass that I made at SCT Indy. A little bit slower by like 5/100ths, and I think the mile an hour was down like 1 mile an hour or something, but very similar pass. So let's go to the data. Let's have a look at the data. So here we go. This is the the Holley Terminator data for that pass, and everything looks pretty good. We can see that in third gear, our peak boost was around, it says here we got 11.3, 11.0, 11.2, 11.3. I'm looking right here at boost. But still, we're like high 10s, low 11s on boost. So nothing crazy. But what I did see that I didn't like is this right here. This RPM spike right here in the middle of second gear. So first gear, this red line here is RPM. First gear goes. This green line here are the gears. So here, the ECU commands second gear. By here, the gear engages. From what I've seen on my Eclipse, this first gear kind of flaring is typical. With this 3.8 V6 and turbo, I'm actually going to be pulling timing out. I wasn't doing that here, and that's probably what led to the issues that I had. But what's really strange is in the middle of second gear, you can see here, we're just in the middle of second gear, there's an RPM blip. And I saw this, and I went, this line here, this curve here, is wheel speed on the output shaft. There's no blip there. And you can see there's blips when it shifts and stuff like that. There's no blip. So I didn't think it was tire slip. So, I'm like, I don't know. That's not good. But whatever, let's run it. Okay. So let's go watch the second pass, and then we'll have a look at that data. Pass number 2. We, at this point, had started running in the boost controller, but I had ran it out so far. We didn't know where it was going to start picking up boost. I'm using just a basic Hallman manual boost controller for now. Do plan to go to an electronic boost controller in the future. But, again, very similar pass. My reaction time, I was doubting myself. Still, 1.566, 60 foot, 10.81, 125, just not much to say. Couldn't see the boards on the video, that's why I cut it off early. Again, not much to say here. So let's go have a look at the data. Okay. Again, data looks much the same. Boost, again, we're like high 10s / 11.0. Didn't pick up any boost, right? Nothing there. Again, looking at this spike. So here we can see first gear, second gear engages, and then it kind of slips up to here, and then it grabs. And here there's a little bit of a blip on speed. Again, this teal line is speed, wheel speed. You can see there's a little bit of a blip there. So I'm in my head, I'm like, maybe it's spinning the tires. I saw that, and that's what I was thinking. Maybe we're spinning the tires. So okay, on to pass 3. Pass number 3. Back into good reaction times for me. I was, figuring out where to let the car go. It's a foot brake car, so kind of a little bit of guessing there, but whatever. 157, 60 foot, slowed down on my ET, 10.9, but still 126 mile an hour. And here's the data log. Thinking back, I had made changes to my shift points. I had kind of tweaked the RPMs that the car was going to command the shift points at under wide open throttle. And you can see here, this dark green line are my gears, 1, 2, 3. Red line is RPM. It's just 1, 2 into 3 is just like this big hump. And my thinking at the time was that this was due to me messing with those shift points. That first was flaring too much into second, getting into third, and it was just doing weird stuff, and we're just going 1, 2, 3, right? So that's where I was in my head. There was a weird smell at the end of the run, but that orange car I was running against was out in front of me. So at the time, I was thinking, man, that I've never smelled this smell before. It's got to be that orange car. Again, that's where I was at the time. Now, thinking back to it, I'll have some other thoughts to talk about here in a bit. But you got all this information you're trying to process and look at, and sometimes you get it wrong. But here we are. Boost still nothing there. Low 11, high 10. Didn't get any more boost into it, even though we were running the boost controller in 1, 2 turns. Stuff like that. Just trying to figure out where it's going to start giving us just a little bit more boost so we know that we're actually on the boost controller. Let's go watch pass 4 and then talk about pass 4. Here's a slip for pass number 4. 0.08 reaction time. Feeling really good. Feeling like I know where to leave with this car. 158 60 foot. Still feeling good there. Went 10.6. This was the best pass for this car to date. And my personal best in my 2G was a 10.4 at 132. So we're getting close. And again, this is only the second time out with this car, but the first real time out getting to make good passes with it. I mean, kind of good passes. 128 mile an hour. Again, best. These are PBs for this car. All this is really good. Never had a car that will go 1.560 foots, and this car is just, I'm real happy with it so far, although we're having issues. Okay, let's go look at the data log. I put my shift points back to what they were the first couple runs. So now we can see first gear comes to here. Command second gear, we get a little bit of an RPM drop. We go from like high 6700s down to 66, and then we still got this same hump here, and it just never really dips, right? It just not clean. This is just real dirty. I've always had really erratic RPM up high, close to 7,000 RPM, and we figured out that was due to my dwell setting was wrong. I'm using Corvette coils, and I had the dwell set to 1.5 milliseconds, and they don't like that. So I fixed that. Next outing, we'll see if that gets better. I've also changed some things on the crank trigger setup. I was using digital rising versus digital falling, blah, 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 blah. You know, we're still figuring this car out. I'm still figuring out Holly. It's all new to me. Anyway, this just looks bad. This, second gear didn't engage. And this time I was out front, and I had that same weird smell that I'd never smelled before. So, in my mind, something's wrong. Whatever clutches in the transmission second gear uses, something is slipping. Be it the front clutch, the rear clutch, the band, something, right? So I did a bunch of digging and was able to finally figure it out that first gear uses the front and rear clutch, second gear uses the band, and I think the rear clutch. I'm probably going to get that wrong. But the rebuild kit I'd used on this transmission was just a run-of-the-mill rebuild kit. I didn't use the Alto. I didn't use the IPT. So I don't know what clutches are in it, right? And I know that there's good bands and bad bands. Pretty sure this had the bad band. The Borg Warner is the good band to have in these transmissions. So, okay. So in my mind, something's wrong. Yeah, we went 10.6. Yeah, we finally started getting a little bit more boost. We got high 11s, low 12s. So now we're on the boost controller. Now I know if I twist the boost controller in, we'll get more. It should get more. This could be due to the slightly colder air, but it really wasn't that much colder. So we made progress, but I'm thinking the transmission is hurt. My thinking is I've smoked the band on this rebuild, and this rebuild on this transmission isn't anything special. It was just a Portland transmissions rebuild kit with a random assortment of clutches. I don't know what materials. My thinking was we were going to run this naturally aspirated. Didn't need the high end like IPT or other performance rebuild, right? So I think that's bit me. I've smoked the band. I'm going to do some work on this thing tonight. First thing I'm going to do is check the fluid, see what the fluid looks like, smells like. If the fluid tells me that there's obviously something hurt on the inside, then I'm going to proceed with pulling the trans and getting a rebuild kit and getting it rebuilt. If the fluid looks clean and clear and doesn't have a smell or anything, then I don't know. I'm probably still going to pull the trans, but we'll see. So first step is to have a gander at the fluid. So here we go. All right, here's the fluid sample. Here's what I've got. So this was fresh Dex 6 ATF that had 2 passes on it from Streetcar Takeover Indy and had been out and put back in because it looked brand new and it smelled brand new. This has 4 passes on it down at Edgewater from Friday night, and it's dark and cloudy, and you can see it's got swirly black stuff in it, and it stinks. This was nice and clear and red and just smelled like ATF. It smells, I'm not going to say it smells burnt, but it smells like it's got junk in it. And it's dark and it's cloudy. And you can see right here where it's doing the swirls. So it's got stuff in it. So I really, really, really think that when I pull this trans, I'm going to find that the band is cooked out of it. If not the front clutch or rear clutch, I didn't do any of the improved clutch packs for these. So we'll see. But for now, based on the fluid, based on what I was smelling, based on second seeming to slip when it was trying to engage. I think that I've cooked the band out of this build, and it's time to rebuild it with better parts. Okay, outro time. What a long video. Wrenching, racing, looking at data, looking at stuff. Outro time. Here's where the car is. Working on taking it apart. Got some stuff taken off. Trans is going to come back out. I've got a rebuild kit coming. I've got a Borg Warner band coming. Gonna tear that trans down, get it rebuilt, and get back to the track. Won't happen this week. Friday is my son's birthday, so I won't be pushing for that. I'd also like to get a drip pan. There's the material over there, that aluminium over in the corner. I'd like to get a drip pan made for it. I'll show all that on the next video. I gotta also get this garage. Look at this garage. This garage is a hot mess. I wanted to get that CNC machine put over here, so I tore down a whole unit of shelves, but I got boxes and boxes of shit that I gotta get cleaned up and gone through. So anyway, that's it. Trans out, rebuild, back in. Probably go faster with the changes to the coil dwell, not slip in second gear. We're gonna pull timing. I've already got tables put into the Holly to pull timing. On the shift, pull like 7 degrees so we're not hammering that poor transmission with that big motor. That's where I'm at. Appreciate you guys watching. Sorry it was so stinking long. Hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.